Hey traders, this is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Thursday, June 23rd. Theme of the day, a lot of rotation out there in the market. Risk disclaimer in front of you before we get into the market recap. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. You could read the whole risk disclaimer here. So when we break down the performance for the indices, you know, I laugh a little bit because a couple times during the day, you know, just very choppy markets, very fast markets. There's a couple times during the day where things were like barely positive. I think the S&P and small caps were negative for the day around around midday today, and the Qs were just barely hanging on to some gains. We're up about 20 basis points. And then we just saw some buyers kind of come in for the rest of the day. But I'll tell you, these days have been, they could go either way based on, 1 hour from 1 hour to the next, so it's very shaky, it seems like, and the rotation is definitely part of that. I mean, major rotation kind of coming out of, a lot of value areas, a lot of the commodity trade that we saw earlier this year, a lot of the hiding places, dividend stocks were hiding place. That was actually where I had parked some money for a while, was in dividend stocks, and that's all coming undone pretty quickly. And just the speed of these moves is something that I was talking about in our member midday video. Is just remarkable how quickly things change, and how difficult I think overall this market is, in terms of, hey, you may have been in the energy stocks or the agriculture stocks for a while. It kind of felt comfortable for about it, being in those, if you have a portfolio of stocks type of thing. I know that there's all different types of traders and investors, but most investors are holding some stocks, right? And it's just amazing how quickly the rotation, once they become out of favor, they really become out of favor quickly. So we'll go over a couple of those areas that even though the indices finished the way that they did for the day, there's there's a lot of damage all over the place. So we'll have some positives, we'll have some negatives in this video. Let's start with the indices and talk about where they are at this point. Still kind of, there's not much that's really changed over here in the last few days. Still trying to, basically make the turn here, carve out a bottom. It's been very difficult for the indices to kind of turn the corner here and just basically come back to the 20-day moving average. So you could see the breadth on the bottom left of your screen, right? Which, what we're basically measuring is up volume versus down volume. And the Nasdaq was where it was at today. NYSE, you could see, was not good breadth. And then ARCA, which is, covers ETFs and a few other things, was positive. But again, not that, overall strong type of price action or type of market breadth. Here's how we looked through the day. And you could see, again, it's just kind of, you got to chuckle at these things, because as fast as this market is moving, you could see a couple times, when we see these long wicks on these candles, it just shows that there's still sellers in this market, right? Whether it's people who are shorting, whether it's funds that are not, wanting to kind of keep this market in check. But you just see a lot of struggling sometimes when the market is trying to move up, right? You just see sometimes in these 5-minute candles that the first 2 minutes are fully green, and then by the time the bar closes, it misses. And some of them, they go red. So again, it's been a struggle, I think, to get this overall market to move. What I would be watching for tomorrow is if we do, get a little bit of, it's hard to even say upside follow through, because the market was up 60 basis points today, but I would watch this 3809. I know some people like these round numbers. They say 3,700. Oh, it's 37. I was listening to commentary from somebody, and not doing any disrespect to them, but it's, we're either going to go 37 or 38 or 39. It's like, okay, you're just picking numbers. Yes. So what I would be watching, like, where are you getting these numbers? Just because they're even numbers? Like, oh, well, if we go below 37, we're going to fail. If we go above 3,800, like, we're going to go higher. Okay, that's pretty easy to say that. But I'm looking at so that said, 3,809. This is based on volume at price, as I always go over in these videos. You could tell that this has been a kind of a sticking point. We've kind of ran into that level a couple of times. Here's where it gets more interesting, I think, than what's going on, because there's just all that rotation in the S&P right now. But NASDAQ, right, is out of value for the week, right? So that's the good. The bad is we can't get through last week's highs. And, so when we look at the daily chart, right, we're just butting up against that bottom of value. So, and the thing is, like, somebody asked me on Twitter, and I try to answer the questions in a nice format. Twitter doesn't really give you, emotion behind, a couple words of reply. But yeah, I think that would be constructive if we get inside value. Does it mean that we're going to like rocket through the other side? Doesn't necessarily mean that. I think every step of the way right now, with as cautious as this market has been, is that, yeah, you want to see a move and maybe a nice green bar that gets you, something that's has conviction to it, that we're breaking inside the value area. The fact that we're closing again right at the bottom of value, like, that's not high conviction, right? So, again, I think, being mindful of how this market is whipping around so much, the rotation, right? Very difficult to have like big size positions on in this market. I've been doing more day trading than anything, but that's even difficult. I've been kind of caught a couple times, right? Because the situation is, we've kind of been reading, the way that I've been reading this tape is that it just looks like the growth stocks have been acting a little bit better. I've been talking about biotech. I'll talk about that again. Today we did see nice software today, but if you're not picking the right areas, right? If you're not early in some of the moves, still chasing in this market is very, very difficult. So for example, I'll give you a couple things and some names that maybe, we talked about. I don't think I talked about this one, but Datadog did finish up 10%. But the whole thing is, right, and if you're chasing, because again, this is making this move in the first half hour. The first half hour, the majority of the gains are in, right? So if you're taking your time during the day and looking for setups, right, then you're going to have to ask yourself, like, are you going to chase a name that's already up 7 or 8% on the day, looking for a couple percent more? And I think the way that yesterday went, not particularly with Datadog, but in a couple other names, if you decided like, okay, you were going to, go after the strength, a lot of these things, like, I think, for example, like Amazon was a good example yesterday. Amazon did this huge move. And then, if you didn't catch this somewhere in the first hour, again, this was just the first hour, that was the high of the day. And then it crumbled the rest of the day. So this was a fight today too. And I made a mistake on the first 5-minute bar, rookie mistake. I should always let the first 5-minute bar close. I thought that, given how quickly Amazon moved yesterday, I'm like, okay, I want to get in on a couple things quickly, because there's issue with timing, and if you don't time these things right, then you're going to be forced to be chasing moves. So again, the moves that we're seeing are not gradual, they're very fast. And I made a mistake here, and I was like, you know what, I'm out of it. Ended up doing fine. I did a similar thing with Microsoft today. So again, even though the market is, some of these stocks are moving in the right direction, they're still tricky. So if you're getting caught, like, and you're frustrated with a couple of these moves, right, what I would say is best, and I need to tell myself this too, is like, scale into names a little bit, right, and leave yourself some room, right? If you're looking for that big hit on the first time you enter a stock, it's just too whippy, right? You're going to get shaken out of things, like I do from time to time, right? But the position size is so important. Right. And again, I say it all the time in these videos, but I still have to tell myself too, that this market is not for home runs. right? It's for hitting singles and doubles, and you know, a double is good in this market, right? But home runs are very like they're very, very difficult. All right, so that was Datadog. You know, that whole group, like a Z-scaler was very strong. Looks like we took out that VPOC on the 5-minute, right? So very strong there in Z-scaler. You know, some of these things, right? It's going to be very interesting to see if the bottom is in. And I think it's too early, number one, to make that determination. But you do at least have levels to trade against, right? That's always the question, and everybody always wants to know, right? Is the low in, right? If you could get yourself to trade in a disciplined manner, you don't really need to know if the low is in. You just need to know where you're going to be wrong, and so you could take off the trade, and then you can try again, right? That's what trading is all about. I understand that there's a lot of, you know, newer traders that come in and they want to know for certain, right? Oh, is this, you know, because they're afraid. Newer traders always seem to be afraid to lose money, right? But that's part of the process. You take a shot at something, as long as you define where your stop is, right? You are going to get you are going to get what's paper cuts, right? You have to make sure again that they're paper cuts and not big losses, and you also still have to limit the number of paper cuts because those could really hurt. But to think that you're going to be able to predict this market, right, and to know when the absolute low is going to be in is very, very difficult. So, you know, what we do is we try to look for where things are kind of changing and for a level to trade against for things that look like they've got momentum into them. But, you know, for now, I would watch basically 158. So that's how I would play like a Z-scaler. If I were to go long, I would be going long versus the top of value, right? That worked the same way, you know, in the beginning of the month, you know, and unfortunately it didn't hold up. Right, and it broke back into value. The good thing was it did make a higher low here. Right now, it's got to, you know, do some heavy lifting above the 50-day moving average. Crowd was another one too. That was, you know, is right at the 50-day moving average. That's one I will be watching as well. MDB is another one in this space too, right? Kind of cyber, kind of software, similar looking picture. So again, you know, these things I think are we're going to know, you know, whether or not these things are going to make it above the 50-day moving average, you know, shortly. I kind of like this DOCN. It's a $46 stock. It's been basing for a little bit, right? And it is above the 50-day moving average. And how I would trade this one is use like a 41.70 stop. All right. So that's what I saw, you know, software strong. Of course, the sector of the day, I think, you know, the sector of the day the last couple of days has been biotech. You know, again, in a downtrend, right? But maybe this is starting to, you know, maybe the bottom is in at this point for biotech, right? Also note where this is, it basically got back to previous support, right? So you could trade this versus, you know, now the 50-day moving average because, hey, it's above the 50-day moving average, right? Very different. Right. And again, what I've been saying about this, and if you've been a regular viewer of my video, you know that I've been looking at this biotech for the last couple of days, saying something might be different going on here. Right. But keep in mind, you got to start somewhere in terms of, you know, if this market is starting to kind of get a little bit better, you're going to see it first in some single stocks as well as in some sectors. So I do view XBI biotech as sometimes it's leading. It did kind of lead on the way down, right? It got into trouble back in, you know, all the way back in, you know, it came off its peak in February of 2021. And since it did, right? So I would call it, you know, I thought this was a leading move too. Biotech was not acting well at all, right? As 2021 went on, and it broke below the 200-day moving average, you know, back in May of last year. So that wasn't a good sign, and I think it was kind of a prelude to, you know, risk on assets last year, right? Certainly, other areas of the market started to break down too, while the S&P was still going up. All right, so that's again very interesting to me. Certainly, I've been talking about with the Chinese internet group today. This group didn't really do much today, right? It didn't do much yesterday either. I had a trade in Futu. I got out of this today. It ended up 4%. I was looking for this VPOC. I didn't get it, and I was afraid that things were just getting a little bit too weak through the day. So I bailed on the last portion of the trade today. But I was hitting I hit a target pre-market in this. Well, again, nice little 1 day trade or 2 day trade. 1 day trade. I put this on yesterday. Yeah. So let's go through a couple other areas. Call buying, right? And so I'm talking about the good stuff first, and then I'll talk about some of the areas that are moving down. But I thought this was very interesting today too, right? This was kind of the stock that really we started to see a lot of call buying right around this. Like, this is where the market kind of changed directions for the day, right around like 120, 130, right? And they were piling into calls in SE. So again, it's a name that like I've glanced out a couple times in the last couple months and said no, doesn't look good. This is the first time I've really seen like that repeat type of call buying where they just kept on going. And I thought that was telling. And I put it in the room. I said, hey, this stock is in a downtrend, but man, there's a lot of call buying, right? So this is what I mean in terms of, again, it's mainly it's all short-term stuff. July, and I guess there's a little bit of August in there, but look at how they just kept on coming for it, right? 2,000 contracts, another 2,000, another 2,000, 1,100, 900, right? And some of these were nice sized trades. This trade over here was $594,000. So someone meant it. This was not retail, right? This is not some retail weekly call buyer, right? So they had some size behind it. So again, it's kind of what we want to see is in some of the growth areas of the market, someone finally kind of come in and say, hey, I'm interested in this thing, And again, this doesn't mean that this thing, blasts up, completely recovers or has a V-shaped recovery. It's just notable that someone finally is interested. And we've seen that in a couple other names, in this growth type space. We've seen Shopify calls. We've seen sizable Shopify calls. We've seen Snowflake calls, which was the name that I played yesterday. Unfortunately, I did not hold it today because I'm just playing names that are in a downtrend. I'm playing them for a day trade, right? But Snowflake was up 12% today. So whoops for not having this on. But again, that's something different too, So again, still has to get through the 50-day moving average, but it's definitely something to watch. And look at the volume today too, right? All right, so that's a few names. Other names that saw call activity. Again, names that the chart is just very difficult. FIS saw nice size calls today too, a big block of calls, which is new. We besides just the fact that hey, this name saw a call buyer, but we really haven't seen too much positioning like this. Right, this is November calls. Look at the size of the trade, $1.9 million, right? So everyone sometimes, I don't want to say everyone, but I always hear when we are moving like we did today, oh, it's short covering, right? And that may be true. That's how a lot of rallies start, is first the shorts cover. But it does look like finally there was some calls where people are taking a shot at some things and saying, hey, this looks like a good place for me to get in. Again, this is just one, probably a fund coming in. Would I buy this? Like, this doesn't meet my system yet, but that's okay. I still think it's notable. PayPal saw some calls today too. Again, really a beaten up name. And deep in a downtrend. I don't have any confirmation yet. I would like to see, and again, a lot of these growth names for me, my system may be different than yours, but I would like to see a move back above the 50-day moving average. All right. And then of course, names that, continue to get run over right now, big rotation. And again, like, as I was saying in last night's video about getting comfortable with, the rotations and stocks that are going to see rotations out of, right? I think that this is a positive, right? To have everybody all in energy stocks, and that was the only area of the market that was going up, is not healthy. So yeah, I do think, even though it's kind of a very fast, and I would almost call it a violent rotation out of, I still think it's a good thing. The agriculture stocks, they're breaking down, right? Copper's breaking down. So again, this isn't like an all bright picture that's going on in this market, right? Copper moving down like this does not give me a warm and fuzzy feeling, right? But if inflation is, and I've been talking about this, till I'm blue in the face, but I do think some of these commodities coming down is good for inflation, right? Inflation is the way that the Fed measures inflation, and the inflation reports cover a lot of different things. It covers wages, it covers housing, right? So it's not all just about the commodities, but we can kind of take from what we're seeing and say, well, at least some of these areas, like, right? I mean, look at nat gas; it's down another 9% today, right? So there are things that are coming in that may make again, I don't really want to predict this, because it's not my thing to predict an inflation report, but I think that this is very good. If the Fed is going to take their foot off the brakes, sorry, if they're going to, yeah, in terms of grinding this economy to a halt, we want to see some of these areas come down. All right. What else? Just a lot of destruction in these areas of the market. The industrials, that doesn't look particularly good. I tried Boeing for a little bit. I thought Boeing might kind of fall down here, but I just find it very difficult to short here. I'm not looking for shorts here. I think if you're looking for shorts here, you're it's going to be difficult, right? Not to say, and I'm not saying that the lows are in for the indices. I've talked about how we're stuck in the middle between the valuary and this VPOC that's lower. Also, the bigger picture on the weekly chart as well, right, is kind of is undetermined, right? But I think that eventually we're going to come out of this bear market. So if you're looking for like a little bit more downside, for me, that's not the right risk to return, to be looking for further downside, because I think that this could be a potential bounce spot. This could be a potential bounce spot, right? So I would rather continue to watch for things developing and starting to move up from the lows than looking for another, big move down. Again, I think positioning is important, right? To wait until we've got more confirmation and better overall market participation. But I'm liking what I'm seeing in terms of, hey, finally some riskier areas of the market are starting to move up. There's call activity, right? But it's a process. Okay, so that's why we do these videos every day. That's why I've been telling members that the important thing in here is to monitor for changes, right? And not get, too ahead of your skis, over the tips of your skis with putting on risk here. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.